Good afternoon. Welcome to From My Point of View. I'm Deborah Burke, the Acting Director of Education here at Gilcrease Museum. I would like to take a moment to ask you to please silence your electronic devices or turn them off if you feel more comfortable doing that. Our speaker today is Norman L. Sandfield. He's an internationally known collector and antique dealer whose bolo ties, or at least a fair number of them, are now a part of the Heard Museum collection, and they're on view just outside this room. If you haven't seen the exhibition yet, I invite you to take that opportunity when we finish today. He is a specialist in the Japanese art form of necktie and has written 2 books on this art form. He's also collaborated with the Heard Museum in Phoenix on 2 successful exhibitions and their publications: Old Traditions in New Pots, Silver Seed Pots from the Norman L. Sandfield Collection, and Native American Bolo Ties, Vintage and Contemporary Artistry, which we have here. He has been a judge of jewelry twice in the Heard Museum's annual Guild Indian Fair and Market, and also at the SWAIA Indian Market in Santa Fe. Sandfield is currently working on a 3rd book with Diana Pardue for the Heard Museum. Maybe you can get him to tell you about that. Today we'll learn about his collecting and writing journey, and I'm sure he will encourage questions. So if you will help me welcome Norman Sandfield.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Jim Pepper Henry. To all the staff here at this museum and at the Heard Museum who made this possible. This show is actually now at its 4th location. It must be good because people want it. I'm very pleased about that. I'm a very lucky man. Can everybody, first of all, can everybody in the back hear me? Raise your hands if you can hear me. That's good. I get up every morning and I go shopping. I don't have to leave my house. I don't have to get dressed. A lot of my shopping is at the eBay Pueblo. And many of these strange and unusual pieces in particular came from there. Things I never would have dreamed about, but all of a sudden popped up, and they were available to me. Things, if you'd given me a private jet, a limousine, and $1 million, I would never have found flying around the country going to antique shops, because that's a dying business. But people are selling on eBay, and God bless them. I also get emails from people because of my Japanese art website. So I know what people are thinking. They're 90% of the people who email me 2 to 3, 4 times a week are asking, what do I have? How do I appraise it? How can I sell it? They don't know what they have, which is interesting to me, that people collect. And of course, we all started out someplace younger, not knowing what we have, and hopefully we've moved up. But many of these people just inherited their collections, and they don't care. In fact, that's one of the biggest problems we have today, is younger people who don't care. Younger people do not collect, they do not join, they take their pocket device, their connected device, their phone, and that's their connecting. If you want to collect, eBay is a great place. If you want to collect cheaply, you can go on Pinterest. You can collect the most expensive pieces, put a picture out of it, and you now own it. I'm not sure how that's satisfying, but it's definitely cheaper than actually buying pieces out of museums. If you're collecting, and I've had a few people come to me and say, I want to buy a good investment piece. And I say, absolutely not. I can't promise you that what you're going to buy is going to be worth more later. And boy, was I right. The world has changed. I grew up, just like many of you have. And the things that people invested in today, for a variety of reasons and a few exceptions, are not worth what they were years ago. Chinese antiques hit a real big, huge bump because of Chinese nouveau riche, people who wanted to buy back their heritage. I think that's wonderful. It really messed with the market. The prices went up. They've come down a bit, but Chinese art is still hot. Ivory is not, because we have new ivory laws being discussed every day. Somebody just introduced a bill yesterday. I got an email into the California State Legislature, one of 3 states that has prohibited totally the sale of any ivory or ivory-related product, pointing out that there are very few elephants in California, and they're not in any danger. But the collectors in California are in danger. Their ivory has just dropped in value. A few people are buying it because they can buy it cheaply, but it's illegal in 3 states, and those people are really out of luck. They're trying for federal legislation, and I could ramble on about that way too long. Books. Books are all of a sudden, the value of books has gone down. Younger people are going online for their education, and some things you can get educated about online. You can learn facts and figures, but you can't learn about art, except for the facts, the figures, the names, the dates, the places. Quality is really hard to teach without a hands-on class. There are many ways to approach collecting. If you collect stamps, coins, Lalique, Steuben, and other items like that, you can be a completist. You can get one of every one in the book. When you're a Bolo tie collector, or another kind of collector, another art form, there's a no ending to it. And screeching to a halt is difficult, as most of you collectors will know. It's only when I come back to places like this to all of a sudden I have a moment of donor's regret. People used to ask me, because this is the second collection I've given to the Heard Museum. I'm working on the third, you'll see. And I say, no, I have no donor's regret, because I get to come and do things like this and share this art form with people and the artists who made them. But I look out there and I go, damn, I didn't get a chance to wear that piece. I didn't even get a chance to hold the glass piece that Weston Singletary. It just came from him on commission and went straight into the display case. It was that tight. So, what have I collected seriously? Family memorabilia. Again, God bless eBay. You'll see in a moment. Japanese netsuke or toggles have been my business for 35 years. I've also collected 19th century plastic netsuke, things like celluloid, artificial horn, because there's something to be learned from that. Images of netsuke. This is an art form like Bolo ties. Those pieces out there are not around anybody's neck. They're put in a display case like many things in a museum, but they were meant to be worn. So these woodblock prints, as you'll see, show how the Japanese of the period of 19th and 18th century actually considered the artwork. Mechanical puzzles, Chinese ceramic puzzle vessels. I've written a little pretentious monograph about that. And silver seed pots made by Native American artists, which is how I got started, and more recently Bolo ties. So these are the books I'm not writing, but I talk about all the time. There is no difference between need and want, and those of you who collect understand that. The rest of you can shake your heads, but there really is no difference. The first collector who I never met was from the first antique dealer I met over 40 years ago when I moved to Chicago, who explained to me about one of his customers who collected pre-Columbian pottery. He was on food stamps. The government was paying for his food, so whatever excess cash he had went to collecting pre-Columbian pottery. Somehow I think that's unfair to us taxpayers, but I understand that he collected no matter what. And the burden of property on the next generation. I have 2 friends, one of whom just died, who were passionate, voluminous, active collectors who really enjoyed it. A friend who died, his wife said to me at within 2 days at the funeral, you know, I could just wring his neck. And then I went to visit the house a couple days after that, and she took me upstairs, and I saw what she meant. This man was a passionate collector, but he and she bonded over this collecting philosophy. My mother had in her closet, a couple of decades back, a wallet full of railroad passes from a short haul railroad that my grandfather owned to get lumber from the mill to the main line, and they were just stuck in a box. So I framed them up in 5 sets, one for each of my siblings. So doing something, having a collection is wonderful, doing something with it is even better if you can find something to do with it. And then my cousins got upset because there weren't any left over, so I had to photograph one of these and have it framed up. And it's back, and it's 2-sided. You can turn this over and see the backs of all those cards. My grandfather got a silver plate tray and a recognition of something or other, I forget what now, and it's an appreciation of work he did, and that came down to the family. I don't know whether any of the next generation cares. They didn't know my grandfather. I did. And maybe that's the difference. This is from the railroad, the Angelina Neches River Railroad. Still exists, short haul railroad. both of these from eBay. And I don't remember where my father got this when I was a child, but of course when you hang it, you gotta hang a horseshoe upside down over the door, otherwise the luck falls out. My father's mother, this little silver salt cellar, came down to the family. And my father was an architect, but he was also an artist. And this is before he met my mother. He did a lot of metal work, and this little switchblade was something he did. And he was a sculptor. And then he designed a Mondrian style needlework for a bench. This is about 6 foot long, that my mother needle pointed. And then on eBay one day, this hat pops up. Now I could go into a hat store and never turn over every hat and look at it, but luckily the seller had read the sign and typed it up, and there it was, my grandfather's store. He died in 1932, so this boater is prior to that date. This is what I did for business. Japanese necktie and in-row, medicine boxes, and the toggles. And just a few examples. These are only about 1.5 inches high at the most. And like other art forms, signed and unsigned, quality is more important than the signature, and yet many pieces sell just for the signature, even if the signature is wrong. And these were worn on the back right hip. Again, they're clothing. The other pieces you see are sitting on somebody's shelf, sort of out of context. So that's a necktie at the top and the pouch, tobacco pouch at the bottom there. And like most Western art, Japanese art is from the front. So anything on the back is not seen in the art form. And you have to turn them around to see pieces like this, a bamboo node on an ivory figural piece with a tobacco pouch hanging from it. So I said, I need to figure this out. How were they worn? So now I have built this very large collection. I wanted to do a book, but books are difficult. But this shows how people wore them, hold them, used them at the time period they really were used by the Japanese. These are Japanese woodblock prints. And 2 more prints. There's a long story about the frog necktie the man on the left is holding. And the other one just has a big example at the top that may relate to the story beneath. I have not had it translated yet. And even American artists did pictures of the red lacquer medicine box with an 18th century ivory necktie attached. And then other pieces I've collected. This is a bronze paperweight. I have absolutely no idea where it comes from. On the back is a beautiful maker's mark, but don't mean it. Like a lot of signatures, I have no idea where it came from. And this is what I started with 30 years ago. Norbert Peschlikai, American artist, upper left-hand corner. I bought a couple of his pots, and I bought more and more and more. It turns out I was the only one in the world who was doing a serious collecting of this. And Diana Pardue, who I'm still working with today, borrowed a few of them for an exhibit. And after that exhibit opened, I said to her, someday when I'm gone, do you think the Herd Museum might want these for their collection? And she said quietly, that would be nice. And the next thing I knew, I said, okay, let's do it now while I'm alive. You know, there are a lot, and this museum knows it as well, there are a lot of wonderful and generous people who give money and art while they're alive, other wonderful people who give art and money when they're in their will, when they're gone. I'm in the third category, which is so small I don't know anybody else in it. I get to play with the stuff and while I give it. I get to go down at the vault at the Herd Museum, and you'll see the next project we're working on in a moment. But this is the seed pod collection that got me into the Herd Museum family. And the book. And while I didn't take these very far, you know, one thing leads to another, and these are Northwest Coast Alaskan non-native artists doing miniature pots, mostly 1 inch to 1.5 inches high, out of walrus and amber and fossilized materials. And this one in particular is fossilized walrus. It's not circular, but it's just beautiful. And then in New Zealand, I stumbled onto an artist, arguably the finest jade artist today, Don Salt, has become a friend. Out of what they call greenstone, we call it jade. It's more expensive if you call it jade. And then I collected mechanical puzzles. I mean, this was a kid type thing that it turns out there's a secret society out there, and I mean that literally, because they don't advertise, they don't have a public website. You have to beg to get it in the door, you have to apply. But they have these, for 25 years now, they've had these conventions around the world bringing collectors together, not crossword or jigsaw puzzles. This is a recent derivation of the Rubik's Cube with much more complexity. And then I started getting some of my woodworker to produce puzzles for me. Salt and pepper shakers, you had to open it as a pear to find the salt and pepper hidden inside. And a dovetail bar puzzle. You can't quite see it in the picture, but there is a dovetail joint in there. And it's got a secret opening lock. And then the Pharaoh's Secret, once called the most disgusting puzzle ever produced because of what you'll find inside of it. But you'll have to wait to find out about that another time. But you can see the dovetails on the side of it. And before our puzzle maker decided his job and family became more important, he made this dovetail cherry surprise cake, which he created a new, we had to create words to define the locking system because nobody had ever done something like that. And then I stumbled off in a different direction with puzzles and wrote a pretentious monograph, being everything I could find out about him, and it was eventually reproduced in a book, and 6 pages rather than 40 pages, on Chinese ceramic puzzle vessels. The puzzle is, it's an intellectual thing. As you can see, there's a handle and spout, but there's no place to fill it. And we'll let you think about that. The one on the right, if you turn it to the left to pour, it won't. If you turn it to the right, it will pour. What's going on inside, and actually it's metal, so I have no idea what's going on inside that piece. The one on the left is a greedy cup on a base, and if you fill it up 2/3, it's fine. If you fill it up too far, a siphon effect is created and it drains out, in this case, into the base. Late 19th century. What do you do with your collection? You know, I hate to give it to a museum where it's going to sit in the basement. So one day, just 2 months ago, I was sitting at home watching a movie, looked up on my shelf, and I had 2 of these Himalayan skull cups that I had bought in India or Nepal decades ago on a trip. A little uncomfortable for some, but I said, you know, those don't belong to me. They need to go someplace. And I knew a man who is tied in and sponsored dancers from the Dalai Lama's sect in India. And I called him up. You know, if you're Jewish or Christian and you need something to go up there on with other your religious artifacts, you go to your Jewish or Christian supply store and you buy it. Candlesticks, bread holders, whatever. You don't find these in your average supply store. So I called him up, and 2 days later they were shipped off to India, and I got a nice letter from their American branch, and a week later from India, a very nice letter thanking me for something they did not have but could use in their rituals. So that's 2 items down, $1 million to go. This is the next project we're working on. Awad Sira, as he's more commonly known, Awad Side, as his name is pronounced in San Ildefonso language, was the most famous painter, Native American painter of the first half of the 20th century. He died in 1955, and next November an exhibit of his work, paintings and metal work, will open at the Heard Museum. A couple days ago was our deadline for text. Most of my text is in, but not all. And so this is one of his paintings. This is the artist himself, done by Charles Strausenbach, who owned the Garden of the Gods trading post where he worked. In the winters he did paintings, in the summer he went to the trading post and did metal work. Like this, a box about 8 inches long. or pastry servers. Apparently pastry servers, whether cake or pie, depends on what you want to define them as, were very popular. There are dozens of these out there. All the same style, but the stamping and the design work is different. A very heavy knife and fork, no, there's two forks, two different forks here. So what brings us here today? Bolo ties. This is the exhibit put together for the Heard Museum. It's hard to believe we've come so far. Unfortunately, as we find out about as we research any story, even stories that happened in the newspaper 3 days ago, you go online, you'll find 3 different versions of it. We expect it to be clean and neat. But in terms of bolo ties, the early pieces were not documented, they were not cataloged, they were not advertised. They were just made and sold. It's the official state tie or neckwear of Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And as Jim Pepper Henry can tell you afterwards, there's a proclamation to make the, what's the appropriate phrase, Jim? For Oklahoma.
Oklahoma Bolo Tie Days here in Oklahoma through the run of the exhibit here and the run of the exhibit in Oklahoma City.
And we're honored and pleased to be honored that way. Thank you for that. So there are people who wear them. Usually, unfortunately, they're the bad guys, or the old gray-haired guys. I watched one movie, and this guy, the bad guy with the gun, is walking through a room wearing a bolo tie. Well, he's a bad guy. I appreciate the fact that he's wearing a bolo tie. And the next thing I know, he walks through a doorway, a noose comes down, grabs him around the neck, and he's dead. So well, it's just an image thing. But here's Keith Carradine wearing a really nice bolo tie by Tommy Singer, most likely, who just died this past year. But it's the nicest one I've seen. In one of the TV shows, the bad guy was named Bolo, because he wore a bolo. But who knew many years ago, the 50s, that's ancient history, that when I collected these scout slides, they would lead to this. But you'll see the Zuni made one in later pictures as well. In modern art, they're represented, natives are wearing them. There is still one Arizona Bolo Tie Society, and we go back and forth between Bolo and Bola for a lot of different reasons I won't bore you with. I had to justify myself to the society because they are still Bola. And they said, you know, if everybody in the state who wore one came to one of our meetings, we could fill up the auditorium or the whatever big auditorium they have in Phoenix. Unfortunately, they get 30 or 40 people to the meeting, which is great, but they all have gray hair. Oops. So this one, which comes from some information I got in Oklahoma City at the museum there, the Cowboy Museum, is sort of out of context of the time frame. This is a movie, I can't see the time date on this movie, 1929, yes. He is wearing a braided leather bolo. But what's happened is, in a lot of movies, pictures, and other illustrations, there's a lot of things going on in this part of the thing. There are cowboys who have shirts fastened with cord before buttons. There's a necklace, there's the stampede cord from your hat. There's too many things going on, you can't always tell what's going on in the pictures. But this man is definitely wearing an early leather cord as neckwear. And the scarf slide, there's this, not really a transition, but scarf slides, Boy Scouts, other people wore them early. This is 1932. This is from the eBay Pueblo. And the little piece in the lower left-hand corner is from the catalog for this particular radio show. This is on exhibit out there. And here we're back to these sheep vertebrae scarf slides. They're still doing this 80 years later, 90 years later. And people were wearing them. I mean, this is good news. They weren't just making them and putting them in a drawer. People actually wore them, as his mother and son show us here. And by 1940, scarf slides were definitely in the fashion. They were advertised, leather and metal, and the sheep vertebrae, as you see in the lower left-hand corner, in catalogs. But the really first true bolo ties, as you'll see in the exhibit, are about 1 inch tall, silver. If you took one of those little things they put at the end of the cake decorating tips, which is a funnel or shape, and crimped it flat, that's what the early pieces were like. And we know that because some of these were made in Scottsdale at the trading post. Byron Hunter, who's still active at the Herd Museum, donated a couple of these 1 inch high pieces that show us he was working in the trading post, with his father's trading post as a little boy, alongside Navajo artists who were making these. And here we have 1953. This was found after the book went to print. This is the slide tie. It's got stamped on the back, the turn, and here's the advertisement. So these are the kinds of documents we look for to prove the existence of these. And there are a bunch of these that we have found, a bunch being 3. The Meeker, William Meeker, working for the Hickok Manufacturing Company out of New York State, put in a patent, 1953, 1954, apparel for neckwear. And that's one of the biggest problems. I'm not going to show you all of those slides, but we have a lot of different names that have been applied to this neckwear. But this is a commercial company. Probably some of you men in the audience, like me, wore some Hickok jewelry as a kid. It's still tons of it out there on eBay, but you can see the ad. And while this is the ad, their ads spelled it B-O-L-A and B-O-L-O. I'm not sure why they use both of them, but that's 1954. Some early pieces, variants on the theme, all the turquoise, all this keystone shape. By 1956, it was a tourist thing. Today you can still buy bolo ties and candy in the gift shops all around the Southwest with a scorpion in it. But in 1956, they were advertised with a real scorpion. And there was a news article in 1957 about them. And then by 1960, this catalog states, there are nearly 100 lasso ties in this catalog, and over the years we've seen 10 times that number come and go. And the picture in the center is from the catalog, and then the identical piece is on eBay. It was on eBay at one time. So they were cataloged, they're page after page after page in this Porter's catalog. Now, a few of you may be old enough to remember the cowboy TV shows and movies. I don't know. Unfortunately, they did not wear bolo ties. They wore scarves, they knotted them, they tossed them around their neck, they twisted them, variations. But until later in their life, as individuals, as civilians, they did not wear bolo ties. Here on the right, we see Roy Rogers and Dale. He's wearing a Victor Cedarstaff piece, a name that's very prominent in this story. And on the left, Hopalong Cassidy wearing the undecorated sheep vertebrae. He wore that for decades. They're relatively fragile. I don't know whether he had a collection of them or maybe he glued it back together or maybe he was just careful with it. But I would say if you wore that in a lot of movies, it would get damaged. But this is 1950. Now, part of the problem is that a lot of these characters, the Cisco Kid, his friend Pancho, on the front of this comic book, a lot of these characters are from books that became movies, that became TV shows, that became comics, that became souvenirs, that they became civilians. So to say that one thing leads to another is not true. I could never find a picture of the Cisco Kid actually wearing one except on this comic book cover. Early scarf slides, 40s and 50s. Again, tourist souvenirs, or kid souvenirs, let's call them. One step up from what you'd find in a cereal box. And as some man came up to me after a lecture once and said, you know, my mother used to make me dress like that. But this is when you go into one of those machines, you put a quarter in, it takes 4 pictures of you, and he is wearing a bolo tie, and here is the same thing that I saw on eBay. It's real. And today, while we never got permission from the actors or the show to use them in our exhibit or book, I'm going to use them here, the show Glee, 2 of the characters are wearing bolo ties, just for the moment, just for that particular show. Not exciting, but I'm excited that some younger person is wearing it. When I went to see the Broadway opening of Bridges of Madison County, there was a bar scene, and there was a guy sitting at a bar. He wasn't in the storyline, he was just sitting at a bar, but even from my seat I could see he was wearing a bolo. And then my brother called me once, he said, you've got to turn on White Collar. The hero, the guy on the left, as you can see wearing a bolo tie, is the young, tall, dark, handsome lead character, is wearing a bolo tie. I'm excited, I'm thrilled. And then I turned it on. And he is wearing the bolo tie. And here is the equivalent that I saw on eBay, it's real. Unfortunately, the reason he's wearing it is there's a dating scene going on. And they don't want the tall, dark, handsome guy to get the date with the woman, so he's acting as a jerk. And this is part of his jerk persona, like talking on his cell phone during when he's supposed to be talking to the attractive woman. Unfortunately, another negative image. And this is the one they lovingly used as the advertising for this event. So here's that early keystone shape I talk about. There are several Hallmark books out there, and they keep coming out. We're working on one author is now working on, within 5 years, his 3rd edition. He's new and improved continually. We still don't know who the Fat H belongs to, but a very prolific shop or individual, undocumented, as so much of the early work is, what I call the Fat H on the left. But what happened is the bolos started out an inch high, and they got bigger, and they got heavier, and they started using pieces like this as fittings on the back. And you can see on the right is a similar shaped piece glued onto or soldered onto a larger bolo tie. And the earliest pieces, generally, these are still done somewhat today, but the earliest pieces are just made out of wire, silver wire, or cut silver sheet that the artist could do in his shop without going to town to buying a fitting. Late 1940s, early 1950s mostly.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On those early fittings, I've seen some of those, and the leather on the straps are often worn. Are they, is there a certain way that you know of to go about replacing those so that they're usable again?
Indian Jewelry Supply in Gallup, New Mexico, or at the eBay Pueblo. Part of the problem is the thickness of the cord. Most people who sell cord measure it by the ply, how many pieces of leather are woven together. But the diameter of the cord is more important to us when we're replacing it, and my assistant has learned to do this. But you can go to eBay, and the key thing to do if you have a nice piece is replace it with comparable, hopefully woven leather. Braided leather is the appropriate word, not woven. And check on eBay. And one of the problems is the length. Everybody's got a different opinion, and some of the pre-cut stuff, if you're a big guy or tall, they come to here. And the rule, I call it a rule, several people have suggested, the bottom of the tip should come down to about your belly button. But that's personal taste. But Indian Jewelry Supply in Gallup or eBay is the place to buy.
Thank you.
And then you're going to have to learn to take off the tips and put the tips back on. And you want to glue them, if you at this point, and you want the ones with the prongs. Because if you use the wrong glue, I had 3, not lost in the sense they disappeared. 3 tips fall off in 1 week. I walked down the hallway one morning and there's 2 tips sitting on the floor. They just fell off because the contemporary artist used the wrong glue. So there are a lot of fittings. The most famous, the Bennett C31. Nobody still to this day knows who Mr. Bennett was. I've talked to a lot of people. The Tulsa, this is the first chance I've had to go to a place that really has this tie-in. As you'll see when you go into the exhibit, there's my picture, and in the next case, you'll see the patent application for the Tulsa spring clip. And these are just some variations. It gets confusing because Mr. Bennett also made clips that went on key rings, as the bottom left thing my bottom left picture shows you. C31, nobody knows what that means. I've had a lot of people guess, none of it makes any sense. There's no other numbers on there. And I called up every micro tool company in the country that I could find online. Whoever made these 50 years ago is no longer in existence. Victor Cedarstaff patented his piggin necklet, later changed it to a yoke, and then a Bolo yoke. He claims to be the creator of this art form. The story goes that he was out riding one day, and he had a hat band on his hat. The hat dropped off into the mud or the horse droppings, or he was afraid it was going to drop off. So he took the hat band off, threw it around his neck, and one of his friends said, "Nice tie you got there, Vic." And he went home and created this. Now, it's a really good story, and I wasn't there. But it's too sophisticated to be true. And it's from the patent on the right, you'll see there's no gap, but in the end, he put a gap in. And Charlie Palaka is a brilliant artist today who is using that kind of fitting. You can change out the cord easily. And here is Victor Cedarstaff business card, Bolo yoke tie. And then he went to work with Sunset Trails. And it's a back and a forth thing. He would cut the metal, he would send it to them, they would shape it, go back to him for doing something, for putting dimples in it. Then it would go back to them because they were engravers. And they don't answer my phone anymore. They have a website that keeps coming and going, so I don't know whether they're still in business in Temecula, California. But they had a deal with him, and they sold some, and he sold some, and they went to different wholesale operations around the country. And their catalogs, most recent catalog, which is quite a few years old now, shows this design. Oops. And of course, art knows no border. So here are similar pieces coming out of Mexico. Same design, same dimples on the back. And as the time went on, Mr. Bennett, the mysterious Mr. Bennett, made these in his garage. There is a couple of native artists whose last name is Bennett, but they're not him. And of course, this is upside down in the first picture, but they dropped, he sold the rights to Indian Jewelry Supply, the company I mentioned earlier. And when they went to redo the tool work after a couple of decades when it was wearing out, they found out they had no patent. A lot of people put patent pending on their work, hopefully protecting themselves, but if you don't apply, it's easy to stamp it on there. And he did not apply. And so eventually they just went blank. And here's another one. This is from the Bolo Company, very famous high-end jewelers and saddle makers and all sorts of leather and silver ornaments. Again, patent pending from the 30s. But again, they did not apply for a patent. Their own design of the fitting. And the Tulsa tension clips. The father and daughter, John Day and Shirley McKenzie. Somebody here said they knew the family earlier to me today. When I talked to them in the research for the book, the reason there's a second patent is because, as with other art forms, they were becoming bigger and heavier and more prominent, and they needed heavier leather cord, so they reinvented it to take the heavier cord, the thicker cord. But this has got a spring in it under that metal centerpiece, And quite often, if you push it the wrong way, they go sprawling, and you can never get it back together again, so you have to roll the little 4 corners down there, and it'll still work. You can see the details in the corner. And the good news is, it has the patent number, or the patent applied for stamped onto the top. So you can research it, it really exists. Here's some more patents that never made it, but other people did it. The man on the right, Mr. Galaminas, I talked to him, I was very impressed. I thought he had created what's called the squash Jew. He told me all his contribution was the golf ball. He tried to cut a golf ball in half and mount the fitting on the back of it. And this is the squash Jew, the most common and commercial available, and it's easily, the cord is easily popped into it. You just snap it in, you don't have to thread it. You can have the tips made separately. You don't have to take the tips off, all the complications. And while it's made on some finer pieces, particularly pieces from Alaska, use this. Mostly it's used on commercial pieces. The figure 8 is very popular these days, again, because the artists can make it in their shop as heavy as they want. John Bunnell says that the late John Bunnell, so nobody here to disprove him, says that he created this because he needed heavier bolos and heavier fittings for heavier cords. And then there's transition. I mean, there's a lot of Anglo and Native overlap. While all of these are sold by the Bell Trading Post in Albuquerque, they're made like a slot machine. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. They were just stamped out assembly line. There are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of each of these designs. And like a lot of other native jewelry, somebody would stamp out this front piece, and somebody else would say, I need some necklaces today, so they'd put one of those on a necklace. Or they'd put it on a brooch, or they'd put it on a keychain, or they'd put it on a bolo tie. So you'll see the same design exactly with different fittings on the back, which is true also of higher-end Zuni pieces. You'll see a lot of the same Zuni design in various jewelry forms. We turn here to the art. Major artists, old and new. Beautiful inlay work. There are people out there who understand turquoise. I can tell you what the turquoise is and where it's from. I'm not one of them. I don't have another 20 years to learn that either. Charles Lolema, the great jeweler, arguably the finest, most popular mid-20th century native jeweler, made some tooth-and-cast piece on the left. And these are early, simple pieces. Tommy Singer did one on the left. It has been the chip inlay. That's not solid turquoise or solid coral. It's chips, and either he or his brother or his father, depending on which book you read, created this concept, and it's what to do with the scraps left over. And of course, back to the Art Knows No Border, you'll find that Mexico is the second most popular place for bolo tie manufacturing. Some beautiful pieces. And there are more of these, and as somebody explained to me recently, the reason the gemstones, like on the left, while they may not be expensive, they're mined in the area, in Tasco. So that's why a lot of pieces have them. And they have a whole dating system legally required, like British silver hallmarks. So if you look up the book, you can find out how to date them a little bit better than you can American made. And there's a book on the subject by Billy Hugard. And it's surprisingly enough, the third most popular country in the world for the manufacture and wearing of good bolo ties is Japan. We have no idea why. The piece on the right is still available on eBay. It's a little expensive, but it's a fabulous lacquer on amber. They do fabulous lacquer in Japan. And these are other good materials. Tortoiseshell wood from Hakone, porcelain, damascene, porcelain again, going clockwise there, counterclockwise, clockwise I was going. And the woman who did the exhibit, who created this exhibit at the Herd Museum, is Japanese. And she went back home and she was stunned to find how many younger people were wearing bolo ties. Still don't know why. Anglos have made them. John Hornbeck is in Gallup, and he did a lot of tufa cast work. He's the largest seller of the coral, the shell that's used in a lot of these pieces. Wood, beading. It depends on where you're from. The Midwest beading is very popular because they don't have this. They did not historically work with silver. They do a lot of beading. If you run up to Chicago and go to the Mitchell Museum this weekend, they're having a show, and you will see an artist show, Christmas gift show, and you will see a lot of beadwork there and leather work because that's popular in the Midwest. And this one on the right is my favorite. It's been attributed to a couple of artists who I was able to write to, and they both said, no, I didn't make it. Other unusual materials. And of course, I can say size matters, but it's hard to tell on the screen, the size. But they get bigger and bigger. And the one on the right, the Richard McGay piece, I bought it without reading the description. I was expecting a little treasure 1.5 inches, 2 inches high. And when it came, and it was 4.5 inches, I was stunned and even more appreciative of the piece. It is beautiful. And if you really want something big, now this is reputed to be a brown bear claw. But once I did the research on brown bear claws, I found out they just don't come that size. So this is probably cow horn. And it's not a piece I wear except once for a picture, but it is impressive. And the people who really know Native American cultures and jewelry can look at a piece from 50 feet away and tell you what tribe made it. Inlay is popular with the Zuni and animals too. This is a completely different Calabaza family than we have in the room tonight. Somebody's got a Calabaza Bolo, but this is another relative. And the Hopi Overlay was created right after World War II because the Hopis wanted to do something different. They wanted it to be a different style, a different technique, and they created this overlay, and other people used it, but it's still Hopi Overlay, 2 layers of silver. Not everyone has a story. Some of them are just worth looking at. The one on the left combines 2 of my tastes, the bolo tie and the seed pot, by the brilliant artist Julius Chione, who used gold, silver, and turquoise. And you can see decorated tips. I mean, this is another part. If an artist wants to make more money and has the time, he will add a lot to the tips, and some of the tips are just amazing. This is Marion Denenpaugh's first, and to the best of my knowledge, only bolo tie, tufa cast on the left. Harlan Kuntz is another famous artist. Did a lot of these. His son now is a jeweler in his 20s, doing differently beautiful work. But you can see the tips. The one on the right by Philander McGay is tufa cast, and that's a whole other lecture. We won't go there, but a different manufacturing technique. I went up to this man standing at the herd market who was wearing the bolo tie on the right. And he was having a talk with his friends, but I stood close enough so that he knew I wanted to talk to him when he was free, but I wasn't interrupting. And he said, "Who made that?" I said to him, "Who made that bolo tie you're wearing?" The piece on the right. And he said, "I did." And I introduced myself, and I said, "Did you make a piece like that?" Well, it's a single head, and it's got feathers on it, and you'll see it on display out there. He said, "Yes, how did you know?" I said, "Well, it's on eBay this week, and I'm going to buy it." And I did. And I sent it to him, and he cleaned it up and sent it back to me, and now it belongs to the Herd Museum, and you get to enjoy it. But a year or so later, he called me, and he said he lived on the reservation, and they had just resurveyed the reservation, and one day he didn't live on the reservation according to the survey. And he needed to raise money to move, and did I want to buy the bolo tie on the right? And of course I did. So that's something to showcase out there also. So, and I'll tell you one of the stories here. Norbert Peschlikai came to Chicago and got a tour, and he saw the Picasso downtown. And he went home and he did his version of Picasso, with the woman's head, very angular. You'll see that one out there too. A friend of mine saw the Josetiwa on the left and said she had to have it when I was finished with it. And I said, and she gets everything she wants, by the way. So I'm not surprised she asked for it. I said, why? She said, I've got military in my family, Vietnam era veterans. And unfortunately, or fortunately for her and me, it's still in the collection. She still talks to me though, that's nice. And this is the Norbert Peschlikai's interpretation of the bolo, of the seed pot he made, that's on the cover of the book. I have time for one quick story here. I bought this piece on the left from a man whose mother made it. And there's a long story about Grandma gave the mother, her daughter, 3 pieces of turquoise well in advance to make Christmas gift bolos for people in the family. And Christmas morning came, and this little boy, now an adult who sold it to me, opened his and was just ecstatic to get this piece. And he did not hear every other adult in the room go, because that was the piece intended for the mother's lover. I don't know what the mother's lover got, as he tells the story, but that was the piece intended for him. And then many years later, the epilogue is, he found out he was adopted. So some of these pieces have stories, and if the seller or the owner doesn't write them down, they disappear. Barry Goldwater may never have actually worn this bolo tie, but it was made for him through the Tempe Bolo Tie Society by Chief Dodge. As for the bolo tie group, for those who couldn't afford it, lower right-hand corner, they made some silver ones as well. That's from the eBay Pueblo also. And we have a website, not very active, but you can always go shopping. So I encourage you, men and women, to dust off your bolos, wear them with pride. And maybe they will help us with the resurgence of bolo ties. Let's see. There we go. Thank you very much. Some other questions? I told you everything. Well, that's good. Yes, ma'am.
You said that some very outstanding ones were not signed and they were not collected. As a novice collector, how does one know whether it's worth the price if it's not signed, or when you're out looking?
As in many art forms, you have to find a dealer you trust. You have to decide what you're willing to pay. Unsigned artwork can be beautiful. What looks good on you, of course. You have to find a dealer you can trust. There's a $7,000 bolo tie on eBay I would not recommend, but I'd pay $25 just to look at it in person, because it is the strangest, ugliest thing I've ever seen. But they haven't lowered the price because it's been there for 6 months. So if you're, in a shop in like Scottsdale and you go to Bill Faust or Gene Waddell, you're going to pay some good money, but you're going to get really good stuff from really good dealers. Or you go to one of the Native American art shows and buy them directly from the artists. Or you can go to your museum store, which has some nice pieces here. And it's a learning curve, as with any other art form. But you have to buy what you like, buy what you can afford, ask questions.
Thank you.
Okay. That it? All right, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
I want to remind you there will be a book signing immediately following our release here in the museum store, so you might want to go there and look at the bolo ties, and look at the book for the exhibition. Our next program from my point of view, will be Friday, January the 8th. Our speaker will be Dr. Bruce Howell on his new book, 1806, The Exploration and Settlement of the Cherokee Nation in Indian Territory. So I invite you to join us then. Thank you for coming today.